In the stillness of his modest presidential office in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone beneath the hum of a ceiling fan. The room wasn't grand, just a weathered desk, 2 solar lamps, and stacks of reports bound by rubber bands. But to Traoré, this space was the command center of a revolution, not of guns, but of ideas. His eyes moved slowly across charts, tracking solar energy output and pilot irrigation projects in rural provinces. The data was promising. Since taking office, his focus had been clear: empower the people with tools, not pity. Solar energy, local engineering, low-cost innovation. It wasn't glamorous, but it was working. Then, something struck him. It wasn't the numbers. It was what the numbers meant. Thousands of families now had light after sunset. Children were reading at night. Farmers were harvesting twice a year. He leaned back, heart beating steady. This wasn't charity. It was sovereignty. Without calling in advisors or drafting a speech, Traoré reached for his phone. He opened his social media app and typed a message. No hashtags, no slogans, just a single post, calm, direct, and aimed far beyond Burkina Faso. Africa doesn't need saviors. It needs partnerships rooted in respect. While some invest in escaping to Mars, we are building solutions here on Earth to feed absolutions here on Earth. Educate and uplift our people. The future of innovation is not only in satellites or electric cars, but in the hands of those who understand real needs. He stared at the words for a moment, then hit post. Unbeknownst to him, that single paragraph would set off a chain reaction across continents. Within an hour, it was trending across Francophone Africa. Within a day, it was translated into 10 languages and circulating in global forums. But what Traoré didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that across the Atlantic, inside a glass and metal mansion in Austin, Texas, the post had triggered an alert on a very different kind of dashboard. Elon Musk, billionaire tech magnate, was seated before 5 screens tracking global trends. One notification blinked in red: Burkina Faso president's post gains traction. He tapped the alert. Read. Paused. Read again. This guy has guts, Musk muttered, adjusting his glasses. For the first time in months, he didn't delegate the reply. Instead, he opened his own Twitter account and typed, "It's interesting to see African leaders talk about innovation. But do they truly understand the difference between disruptive tech and local fixes? Maybe we should exchange ideas." Click. Send. The tweet hit like thunder. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré's phone buzzed. He read Musk's words. Then he smiled, not offended, but energized. "Prepare the press room," he told his aide. "Let's show Mr. Musk what real innovation looks like." And just like that, a global conversation had begun, not with applause or fanfare, but with 2 visions on a collision course, and the whole world watching. Thousands of miles from Ouagadougou, behind the tinted glass walls of a high-tech mansion in Austin, Texas, Elon Musk sat surrounded by glowing monitors. The world's wealthiest innovator, known for colonizing ideas as quickly as he did headlines, was reviewing a wave of real-time data. One alert blinked at the top of his dashboard. Burkina Faso. President's post on innovation gains traction. He tapped it, almost dismissively. But as the message loaded, his expression shifted. The words weren't loud. They weren't boastful. But they carried weight. Africa doesn't need saviors. It needs partnerships rooted in respect. He read it again, slower. While some invest in escaping to Mars, we are building solutions here on Earth, Musk frowned. Not in anger, but in realization. Whoever wrote this wasn't begging for attention. He was declaring a boundary, a standard. This guy has guts, Musk muttered under his breath, cracking a grin. It was the kind of post he might have made himself 10 years ago before Tesla, before SpaceX, before the noise. He sat up. For a moment, he considered doing nothing. Let it blow over. But something tugged at him. Curiosity, ego challenge. He opened Twitter. His fingers hesitated above the keyboard, then moved with precision. Interesting to see African leaders talk about innovation. But do they really understand the difference between disruptive tech and local fixes? Maybe we should exchange ideas. Click. Tweet sent. The internet ignited. Supporters of Traoré rallied instantly. Activists, engineers, teachers, people who had seen solar lamps light up villages where diesel had failed. Hashtags erupted across timelines. Number, innovation is local. Number, Africa speaks. Number, respect not rescue. Critics of Musk accused him of arrogance. Defenders called it a genuine invitation. But no one ignored it. Across Burkina Faso, phones buzzed like a drumbeat. In dusty cafes and market stalls, people read the tweet aloud with disbelief, excitement, even pride. Traoré's words had reached the top, and the top had responded. Inside the presidential office, Traoré stood by the window, hands behind his back. As the message reached his screen, his aide, breathless, rushed in. Mr. President, Elon Musk has replied. Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, calm and deliberate. This is no longer just a conversation, he said. This is a moment. He turned. Call the press. Let's begin the next chapter. Outside the palace gates, crowds had already begun to gather. Some carried homemade signs. Others just wanted to see the man who had challenged a tech titan without raising his voice. And far away, in his mansion, Musk stared at his own tweet, watched the retweets soar and whispered, "Let's see what he says next." What began as a quiet message in a small African capital had turned into a global spark. Not a fight, not a feud, but the beginning of a confrontation. Far more powerful, a clash of visions about the future of the world. And who gets to shape it? The world held its breath. Within 48 hours of their viral exchange, Elon Musk's team extended a formal invitation. A live-streamed video call between two of the most unlikely figures in global innovation. One, a billionaire tech mogul, with rockets on standby. The other, a young African president, with dust on his boots and solar panels in his fields. Ibrahim Traoré didn't hesitate. He didn't hire a PR team. He didn't rehearse talking points. He simply walked into a modest press room in Ouagadougou, adjusted the mic, and looked straight into the lens. Thousands of miles away, Elon Musk sat in his studio, surrounded by polished glass, satellite models, and LED lighting. The contrast was striking and intentional. Mr. President, Musk began, leaning forward with a half smile. You said Africa doesn't need saviors, just partnerships rooted in respect. But what does that look like in practice? There was no pause, no tension in Traoré'S face. Imagine you're building a bridge. He replied calmly. You can bring in the most brilliant engineers on Earth. But if they don't understand the terrain, the river, or the community, it will collapse. It continued. Voice steady. In Burkina Faso, we power rural villages with solar energy. Not imported. Not complex. Simple. Sustainable. And run by locals. That's innovation that feeds, educates, and empowers. Not innovation that impresses headlines. For a moment, Musk didn't respond. He studied Traoré'S eyes, trying to read what kind of leader he was facing. There was no anger, no agenda, only clarity. But what about scale? Musk finally asked. If something works locally, how do we grow it to reach the world? Traoré smiled, not with arrogance, but with quiet fire. Scalability means nothing if it erases identity. He said, if you want to go global, start by going deeper. Understand the people, the soil, the history. Technology without empathy is just machinery. The live stream chat exploded. Viewers flooded in from around the world, engineers, students, farmers, CEOs witnessing not a debate, but a revelation, a new kind of dialogue, a global north meeting, a rising global south. Not in competition, but in conversation. Musk leaned back. For once, he didn't have a snappy reply. You're right, he said quietly. Maybe I've been too obsessed with the future rockets, AI, Mars, and not focused enough on the people who need help now. Traoré nodded. Firm, but kind. The future isn't just up there in the stars. He said, it's right here. In villages. In children learning to read by solar light. In women rebuilding communities with tools in their hands. Silence fell, not awkward, but reverent. For a moment, the world saw what leadership looked like when humility met wisdom, and as the call ended, two men on opposite ends of the earth understood something rare. They weren't just talking about innovation. They were redefining it. 2 weeks after the live stream shook the world. A sleek private jet touched down on the sun-baked runway of Ouagadougou International Airport. The door opened slowly. Cameras flashed, and out stepped Elon Musk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, face squinting into the African sun. This was no PR stunt. He hadn't brought an entourage of executives or luxury vehicles, just a small team of engineers, solar specialists, and 2 notebooks filled with questions. The invitation had been simple. The purpose, even more so. See, listen, learn. President Ibrahim Traoré waited by a dusty convoy of pickups. No red carpet. No staged photo ops. Just firm handshakes, clear eyes, and quiet determination. Their first stop wasn't a palace or a tech park. It was a tiny village 3 hours from the capital. Dirt roads, mud brick homes, chickens darting between solar panels mounted on handmade wooden frames. This is where it begins, Traoré said. As they stepped out, they were met by a group of farmers, calloused hands, sun-worn faces, standing beside a self-built irrigation system powered by recycled solar batteries. Buckets turned into turbines. Broken wires reconnected by local teenagers who had learned through government-funded workshops. Musk crouched to examine the system. He touched the wires, traced the flow, nodded slowly. "You built this with scrap?" he asked. Wide-eyed. A man named Isa stepped forward. "Scrap to you. Survival to us." That line would go viral the next day. But for now, Musk stood silent, watching water trickle through the homemade pipes onto rows of healthy maize stalks. He looked at Traoré. This time, not as a skeptic, but as a student. "Back home," Musk said quietly, "we're still trying to figure this out. With all our labs and funding." Traoré smiled. But it wasn't smug. It was proud. Sometimes, the best innovation comes not from abundance, but from necessity. They visited a local school powered entirely by solar panels. Children inside were learning coding on donated tablets, connected through a mesh Wi-Fi network designed by two teenage brothers from the village. Musk was floored. "This isn't just smart," he said. "It's revolutionary." As the sun began to set, they stopped at a small community center where women were assembling LED lamps from spare circuit boards. One of them, a young woman named Awa, held up a soldering iron and smiled. "I used to sell vegetables at the roadside," she said. "Now, I teach electronics to other girls." Musk stared at her for a moment. He didn't say a word. He just nodded deeply, respectfully. That night, as he looked out over the lights of the Capitol, Elon Musk made a quiet vow. This trip would not be forgotten. And this was not charity. It was collaboration. Because here, in the dust and heat of West Africa, he had found something more powerful than data or design. He had found purpose. The world didn't just watch. It reacted. News of Elon Musk's visit to Burkina Faso dominated headlines from New York to Nairobi. But it wasn't the billionaire's presence that captivated audiences. It was the humility with which he listened and the quiet power of what he saw. Social media flooded with clips from the village tour, the recycled irrigation system, the teenage coders, the women soldering light into homes once lost in darkness. Hashtags exploded across platforms. Number innovation with dignity. Number Africa leads. Number respect not rescue. Back in the U.S., pundits and CEOs found themselves asking uncomfortable questions. Why hadn't they looked to grassroots solutions sooner? What did it mean that the world's richest man had been humbled, not by a competitor, but by a village girl with a power tool? Elon Musk stood before a packed press conference in Austin. Just days later, microphones crowded the podium. Reporters leaned forward. "This is not just a business opportunity," he said, pausing. "It's a lesson. One I wish I had learned sooner." He took a breath. "We spend billions trying to invent the future. But in Burkina Faso, I saw people shaping it with scraps, sunlight, and sheer will. That's not charity. That's genius." The room went silent. Then, thunderous applause. He announced a pilot project, a multi-million-dollar investment to expand solar infrastructure in rural Africa, starting with Burkina Faso. But more importantly, he committed to doing it with local communities. Not for them. No blueprints dropped from the sky. He added, "Every step will be built from the ground up with those who live it, lead it, and own it." In Ouagadougou, Traoré stood before a chalkboard map, circling regions set to receive support. He wasn't celebrating fame. He was managing logistics. Because for him, this wasn't a victory lap. It was just the next mile. The first project launched in a village called Sanguli. Teams of Burkina engineers worked side by side with Musk's solar experts, not in uniforms, but in harmony. Kids ran between trucks, laughing as panels went up. Mothers watched lamps flicker on for the first time in their homes. And then came a moment no one expected. During a site visit, a barefoot girl named Awa walked up to Traoré, holding a tiny wooden sculpture. Two human figures, holding hands. She looked up and whispered, "For you and Mr. Elon." Inside the sculpture was carved, "Kindness unites worlds." Traoré held the gift in his hand. Eyes locked on the message. Around him, no speeches, no chants, just quiet awe. A spark had become a movement. A conversation had become a covenant. Because somewhere between a billionaire and a barefoot girl, the world saw what true progress looks like. Not in the height of towers or the speed of rockets, but in the moment. A light turns on, and a forgotten village knows it is no longer invisible. In the months that followed, the partnership between Elon Musk and President Ibrahim Traoré didn't just make headlines, it made history. The projects weren't contained to one village. They spread like firelight through the plains of Burkina Faso, reaching corners of the country that had never known electricity, let alone empowerment. And the heroes weren't politicians. They were people like Fatou, once a single mother scraping by selling roasted corn on the roadside. Fatou had enrolled in a government-run night course in electronics. At first, she only wanted to fix her son's broken radio, but within weeks, she was repairing lamps, then building them, then teaching other women how to do the same. "I used to count coins just to buy bread," she said during a televised interview. Eyes misty but proud. "Now I train women who never thought they mattered. And every time I light a home, I feel like I'm lighting a piece of my past on fire." Her story went viral. News outlets from Europe to Latin America began broadcasting segments titled "The Women Powering Africa." One reporter called it the most heartwarming twist to a global tech narrative in years. But Fatou wasn't alone. Across the country, everyday people were becoming engineers, innovators, mentors. A group of teenage boys in Koudougou rigged a defunct satellite dish into a solar internet relay. A widowed farmer in Yako turned discarded phone batteries into a backup energy grid for his neighbors. Every week, new videos surfaced, simple ideas turning into profound change. And then came Awa's second moment. During a joint inspection of newly installed panels, Traoré and Musk revisited the village where they'd first met her. This time, Awa wasn't just holding a power tool. She was leading a workshop, guiding 10 other young women on how to build compact solar kits from recycled electronics. Musk watched from the back, stunned. Traoré leaned in and said, "She's training the next wave. We didn't just give them tools. We gave them ownership." Musk nodded, visibly moved. "This is what real scale looks like." Then, a little girl walked up, no older than 8, clutching a makeshift doll wrapped in cloth. She looked up at Traoré shyly. "How are you doing in school?" he asked gently. She smiled, barely whispering, "Now, I can dream." It hit him harder than any policy meeting or press conference ever could. In that single sentence, he saw what all the data never showed: the human soul of innovation. Because this wasn't about solar panels. It wasn't about Elon Musk. It wasn't even about Burkina Faso. It was about a forgotten world being seen, heard, and given the tools to shape its own story. And somewhere between Fatu's soldering iron and a child's dream, the world realized the greatest power you can give someone isn't electricity, it's belief. The sun was setting over Ouagadougou when a crowd began to gather in the city's central square. Women in brightly colored dresses held children on their hips. Farmers arrived on motorbikes, caked in dust. Students waved hand-painted signs. Reporters from around the world lined up shoulder to shoulder. No celebrity was performing. No dignitary was being sworn in. They had come for something far rarer, a celebration of dignity. At the heart of the stage stood President Ibrahim Traoré, dressed not in a suit, but in simple traditional garb, the kind worn by village elders and market vendors. No teleprompter, no quick cards, just a microphone, his voice, and the weight of a nation watching. He looked out at the sea of faces, faces of people who once felt forgotten. "We are not here," he began, his voice resonant, "to celebrate numbers or policy. We are here to honor those who built this country with their hands and refused to give up." The crowd was silent, not out of indifference, but reverence. "When I first spoke with Mr. Musk," he continued, "he asked me the difference between disruptive technology and local projects." He paused, scanning the crowd. "Today, I say to him, and to all watching, they can live together. One does not erase the other. One uplifts the other." Suddenly, a ripple moved through the crowd. A small girl emerged from the front row, holding something tightly in her arms. It was no phone or flag. It was a wooden sculpture carved by hand. Simple yet powerful, she climbed the steps slowly, looked up at the president, and offered it with both hands. Two human figures holding hands. Engraved at the base were just 3 words: "Kindness unites worlds." Traoré knelt, accepted the gift. And for a brief moment, this leader, who had stood unshaken before generals and cameras, closed his eyes. The square fell still, because everyone there understood this wasn't about speeches anymore. This was something sacred. He rose, held the sculpture high, and declared, "This is our future. Not just innovation, but unity. Not just electricity, but connection. Not just hope, but action." As thunderous applause broke out, Elon Musk stepped quietly onto the stage. No suite, no script. He wasn't there to speak. He was there to witness. He nodded to the crowd, then to Traoré, and simply mouthed, "Thank you." In that instant, no words were needed. From the streets of Sangouli to the skyscrapers of Silicon Valley, a new message had been born, not about who had more power, but about who used it to uplift others. And as fireworks lit the sky over Ouagadougou, one thing was clear. The greatest revolution wasn't technological. It was human. The morning after the celebration in Ouagadougou, international headlines didn't talk about billion-dollar deals or government policies. They talked about a wooden sculpture. 2 human figures holding hands. 3 words carved inside: "Kindness unites worlds." The image flooded social media, news feeds, magazine covers. But the story behind it, the connection between a barefoot girl, un humble président, and the world's most influential tech mogul, was what truly captured hearts. In studios across America, anchors paused mid-segment. In a time when division dominates the headlines, one said, "This might be the most inspiring story of the year." But in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré didn't stop to savor the attention. Instead, he put on his jacket, gathered his team, and returned to the villages. He was seen walking beside engineers, inspecting new solar installations, checking batteries, even helping lift panels with his own hands. There were no cameras following him this time, just the quiet gratitude of people who saw him not as a ruler, but as one of them. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Elon Musk appeared on a primetime interview. The host leaned forward, eager. "What surprised you most about your trip to Burkina Faso?" he asked. Musk paused, then answered not with data, but with emotion. "I always thought innovation meant inventing something the world had never seen. But there, I realized innovation can also mean repurposing what you already have to meet real human needs. That kind of brilliance doesn't come from boardrooms. It comes from villages." The audience applauded not because he said something profound, but because he meant it. He announced a global initiative to fund grassroots engineering projects in underserved regions, modeled after the Burkina Faso partnership. Not a top-down investment, but one built with communities, not above them. In classrooms from Nairobi to New Orleans, students watched videos of AWA teaching other women to solder wires, of Fatu speaking at conferences, of children drawing solar-powered homes in crayon, and in quiet corners of the world, where power outages were once a daily reality. Lights flickered on powered by the sun, maintained by locals, and born from a vision that never chased fame, only change. During a final visit to Sangouli, Traoré bent down beside the same little girl with the cloth-wrapped doll. "Are you still dreaming?" he asked, smiling. The girl grinned. "Bigger now." He laughed, then stood, his eyes full not of pride, but of peace. Because in a world chasing rockets and riches, a dusty village in West Africa had reminded us all, the future isn't built by the loudest. It's built by those who listen, serve, and believe. And in that belief in small acts, in humble hearts, in joined hands, the world changed. Not because someone tried to save it, but because someone chose to respect it.